Today we're going to answer the question, Porsche Macan or Porsche Cayenne? Which is the right Porsche SUV for you? Let's take a closer look. To compare these two SUVs today, we have the GTS versions of both. In terms of the Macan, actually, the GTS is the top of the range. Of course, you get the very typical trademark Porsche headlights, which looks really nice with these 4 LED strips. As we go further towards the middle of the bumper, this black section with these huge gaping air intakes is very unique to the GTS in the Macan. I think it looks quite nice. It emphasizes the width. I also like, for example, some of the texture here that you see right in the bottom. There's a lot of assistance systems on offer for both of these SUVs, and you can see, for example, the camera and some sensors over there right in the middle. Coming to the Cayenne, right off the bat, we get a little bit more of that air of sophistication and maturity right here, even in the headlamp cluster with all of those complex different LED units. But in the middle of the bumper as well, this is a much more sober, dark tone color, similar to the body color right across the middle. I think, you know, the Cayenne definitely looks similar to the Macan, but it does feel like the elder brother. What do you guys think? The Macan GTS, being the top of the range for the Macan model, is actually quite well fitted. It comes with a lot of great standard features. For example, you get the air suspension, the sport air suspension, which drops the chassis by about 10 millimeters. And then it also has things like active stability management. With the GTS as well, you get these really nice 21-inch wheels. What is different, of course, is you can get different designs and versions of these wheels optionally, as well as those ceramic composite brakes that you see in the back with that really bright yellow caliper, also options. As we move along the side, there's a dash of carbon fiber towards the lower part of the door. Very smooth lines overall through the side of the SUV. Up here as well, I do like the glossy black window frame, and this really bright red color definitely stands out. The Macan is about 4.7 meters long, and as we make our way to the Cayenne, you'll see that first of all, it's much bigger. It's 4.9 meters long. But unlike the Macan GTS, the Cayenne GTS does not get a lot of the features as standard. For example, you don't get air suspension as standard, nor do you get the rear axle steering as standard, so you have to get all of these things as options. Also 21-inch wheels with a nice design, but standard brakes with red calipers, which I think they look quite nice, and of course for most of the street use that this is probably intended for, those will serve the purpose quite all right. None of that fancy carbon fiber work towards the lower part of the door. This is actually a dark olive color. It might look black because we don't have too much of sun here today in Rome, but it is a very dark green. If you come close to it, you can actually see that, and in the sun it does sparkle. Here you see the contrast between that dark olive green color and the black a little bit more clearly. This, of course, has the optional air suspension, this particular model that we have here, this particular SUV. So this also has a lowered ride height. It also has active stability management. Both of these have the optional torque vectoring. And of course, like I said, this also comes with rear axle steering. The story continues as we take a look at the back of the two SUVs. The Macan still appeals to the boy racer in me with a black spoiler, dark black elements for the badging over there, and a much more prominent rear diffuser, again with that texture that we saw in the front bumper. Nice quad pipes, and the diffuser also rakes up quite a lot, so this is again part of the new facelift, so definitely looks a lot more athletic. Some nice detailing as well. For example, if you take a look at the rear lights, there's a nice pattern inside as well. The Cayenne GTS appeals to the 30-year-old in me. It also has the similar elements with the spoiler, blacked out badging, diffuser and quad tailpipes, but it's a little bit more mature, a little bit more sophisticated. Here's a cool design feature of the Macan. There are punch outs for the headlamps on the bonnet. How cool is that? So what do we have underneath here? This is the 2.9 liter V6 bi-turbo petrol engine. We see this of course in the S, as well as this is also available in lower trim versions of the Cayenne. A very robust engine. Here it makes 440 PS or metric horsepower. When you have the Sport Chrono Pack, it can do the sprint from 0 to 100 kilometers an hour or 62 miles an hour in about 4.3 seconds. The VMAX is 272 kilometers per hour. This comes with the 7-speed dual clutch transmission, the PDK, and of course all-wheel drive. So sports suspension, which is the sports air suspension rather, is standard, which lowers the body by about 10 millimeters, and there's optional torque vectoring. Nice logo, same logo on both the cars. It's the 3D, of course, not a sticker. You can see a little bit of that dark olive color on this car now in the sun. Inside the heart of the Cayenne GTS is the 4-liter bi-turbo V8 petrol engine. This makes 460 PS, so just about 20 PS more than the Macan GTS, but this is of course a little bit heavier, and it does the 0 to 100 kilometers an hour sprint in 4.5 seconds versus the 4.3 in the Macan GTS, of course both with only the Sport Chrono Pack. The VMAX is actually just a little bit lower than the Macan GTS at 270 kilometers an hour. This has the Tiptronic S 8-speed auto box, so not a dual clutch. With the optional air suspension, of course, this can also be lowered by 10 millimeters. This air suspension also has active roll stabilization, and you get optionally also the torque vectoring and the rear axle steering. Of course, this is also 4-wheel drive. Let's take a look inside the hatch. We get an automatic tailgate, which is great. We also have the switches to raise and lower the rear axle with the air suspension that we have fitted as standard with the GTS. But funny to see that we don't get switches as standard to tumble the seats down. But anyway, you get 490 liters of trunk space, and to be honest, it's a very long trunk, so it's a very usable space, because this is much more usable on a day-to-day basis versus the volume in terms of height, because if you have a long item, it's easier to load them. So in terms of practicality, you're definitely not compromising when if you're going to get a Macan. There's even more space underneath in case you don't have some of the emergency kit. For example, you also see here, there's the Bose, part of the Bose sound system is also down here. On the other hand, if we look at the Cayenne, this is 645 liters of trunk volume, so significantly larger. It is wider, but the length, honestly, is just about the same. So, sure, the volume really helps when you have to load much larger items. So again, this is a little bit more of a family SUV, family oriented. But here as well, air suspension, which is optional in the Cayenne GTS to raise and lower the rear axle. But again, no switches as standard to tumble the rear seats. Here we have the key. The door opens fairly wide. You have some nice materials with that red contrast stitching, which looks really nice, matching with the exterior color. Nice inlay of wood finished material on the top, and some brushed aluminium or polished aluminium finish material as well. This being the GTS, you get Racetex material for the seats, and we'll take a look at that in a moment. But overall, happy to see buttons for everything, including the rear hatch and the automatic mirrors and windows. Pretty sizable door bins as well. As we make our way into the interior, very familiar, of course, Macan. The interior is a very friendly place to be. A lot of black in this case. Again, with the GTS version, we have that red contrast stitching through the top of the dashboard. The seats themselves are Racetex, so they're part leather, but at least you get this Alcantara material right here in the middle, which really grips you well when you're on the racetrack. Automatic controls down here for pretty much everything on the seat, lumbar support, and so on and so forth. All right, let's get inside. Still, it's an SUV, right? So ingress is pretty easy. The overall gap in the door, or this rather, the opening in the door is large enough to accommodate people of all sizes. The seating position already, I can tell you, feels really nice. These seats are comfortable and plush, yet firm on the outside, which is just right because it holds you in place, and the support is in the right places. Lots of adjustability, including automatic adjustment here in the steering column for reach and rake. So it's very nice. The steering wheel also has a great grip to it, with some control, so it's not a pure GT steering wheel. You still have some of the buttons here, as well as paddle shifters. And overall, the cabin feels very well put together. Very typical Porsche instrument cluster, which is always great. Red background color for the tachometer with the GTS logo right in the middle. Speedo on the left, and a nice screen on the right hand side where you can visualize a lot of different information. Some vehicle information, but also audio, phone, even your navigation. The entire map can be viewed on this screen. So very useful information, including your tire pressure monitoring, the torque split between the front and rear axles, your chrono, and of course speed limit and other assistance systems. Let's take a look at the infotainment system. 10.9 inches, very sleek. I like the black color, and these actual text are very sharp, very clear, very easy to read when you're driving, which is really important. You have navigation with Google Maps, so really useful, intuitive if you're used to using Google like I am. You have, of course, connectivity with phone. However, you only get Apple CarPlay. You have some abilities to change some of the settings in the car, which is very useful, including the displays and the brightness and things like that. Of course, you have the Sport Chrono, where you can have the lap timing and things like that. As we move further down, we have some hotkey buttons, some shortcut buttons to go left and right to jump between the different stations, for example. A nice knurled finish on the rotor, the rotary dial for the volume control, which is really nice to see. Even these buttons here have a nice haptic and audio feedback, so I like this. It's not just touch, but there's definitely actual physical buttons and haptic feedback. And also, if you don't want to use the touchscreen while driving, you can use this knob here, for example, to navigate between the different options. So again, very useful. A lot of connected car tech, including a new telemetry app, which is pretty useful for the racetrack. Further down here, we have the gear lever, and again, more haptic and capacitive buttons or touch buttons for the climate control, but also a really nice combination of the two because of some actual physical buttons and rocker switches with nice knurled finish and a nice sound. So best of both worlds, which is what I love to see. Dual zones for the front too, and then you also have the buttons for the different modes of the air suspension, the ride height, the exhaust, and other shortcuts, including an off-road button, because of course this is the Macan. So best of both worlds. I like the color combination of black and the very nice contrasting white text. Now let's see how practical the Macan is in the back seat. Getting in is not too bad actually. I have a pretty large opening. The door is not 100% 90 degrees, but it's large enough, so it means that you can fit your child seats relatively easy. Also really easy to locate these ISOFIX points, although I don't like that these little tabs come out because you're going to definitely lose these. But Racetex Alcantara, red stitching, very nice. Also in the middle over here we see you get another climate zone and seat heaters and a couple USB-C. In terms of space, well, I have pretty good knee room, so this seat is set to around my driving position. I'm about 5'8", so both of these front seats are set to a position that would be comfortable for me. I'm about, like I said, 1.73 meters. Headroom is adequate, but I don't really like this monochrome black interior. It just makes the car feel a little bit smaller, which is a bit of a shame because honestly, Two people in the back are very comfortable. Certainly there's a big transmission tunnel, but a third person could also sit if needed. However, the backrest is a bit firm actually, and that's because behind it we have cup holders, so there's no padding that runs all the way through. Instead there's this hard plastic and hard plastic here. So not very comfortable for 3 people, but 2 people definitely. Here we have the key, same key as the Macan. But you know, I used to eat these chocolates as a child, which had the shape of a car. They were looking exactly like this. Do you guys know what chocolate I'm talking about? Put it down in the comments below if you do. Well, the door is definitely a little bit bigger. It feels just a bit more heavy compared to the Macan. First of all, you will notice that, okay, this is full animal skin leather, and I would prefer the Racetex because it's a little bit more sporty and you can be that much little bit kinder to animals. And of course this brown color might not be to everybody's taste, but this is a more luxurious version according to Porsche. Materials, although apart from the leather, are also very nice up here with that metallic finish and glossy finish on the top. Switchgear for the windows and the mirrors, and a fairly generous door pocket as well. Getting inside is even more easier than in the Macan because of this door opening. It's also a little bit higher, it feels so. The seat, of course, can be adjusted with a lot of these different controls for pretty much everything, including lumbar support and things like that. So finding a comfortable driving position is totally possible, but you see, this is the lowest that the seat goes, and I definitely feel in the Cayenne that I'm sitting in an SUV, whereas in the Macan, when the seat was low, you felt like you were sitting in a car actually. So that's, I guess, one fundamental difference. Again, if you like brown leather, then you might be very happy. I, for one, would prefer the Racetex, but it's a very, very vast, estate-like, stately interior. Let's talk about the steering wheel and the infotainment system. Why don't you hop inside? This infotainment system is also that much better and nicer than the Macan's. It feels a little bit more slick, and the colors also pop compared to the more monochrome version that we had in the theme in the Macan. And more importantly, you see, this also does come with Android Auto. Oh, let's see, a lot of connectivity features as well. And I like these tiles up here where you can have, for example, your audio, your phone, as well as navigation all together. Navigation again works really well. You see here, it's very slick comparatively. Yeah, I think it's a very nice version of that. You also have more drive mode selectors. So you have, of course, this knob up here to change the drive mode and go through the menu. A lot of assistant features as well, including, for example, lane keep assist, lane change assist, cross traffic alert, parking sensors, etc. So much more easier to navigate through these menus and very useful. You have shortcut buttons, also capacitive, but with haptic feedback, which is very nice. And similarly, you also have actual physical buttons, like for example, there's a knob here to go through the different menus and a roller to go through the volume. And again, I like this combination of physical knobs and rollers and switches along with capacitive buttons. You get seat ventilation and heating. You have the button for the air suspension. Jumping from the Macan to the Cayenne kind of feels like jumping from the 718 to the 911. And that kind of starts off with the steering wheel here, so it's very familiar as well. You have controls, for example, for the paddle shifters for the automatic transmission right here in the back. It's nice. It's got a cold metal finish, so it feels good. It's nice heavy click. Controls, for example, for the the instrument cluster, your telephone. This is a hotkey button that you can personalize to do whatever you want. Right now we have it set to change the turn on the sports exhaust when we want to be loud. Down here we have the drive mode selector, similar to the one we see in the Macan, with that sport response button to activate that extra boost for that small amount of time. Here we see 5 different dials, but in reality, of course, it's only the one in the middle with the large tacho, which is analog. The rest are actually screens. So if we first look at the one on the right-hand side, for example, we can have some vehicle information and the time, for example, but then we can go to the trip, the full map, even a night view assist, so it's like a thermal imaging camera for night vision driving, your sport chrono, and your G-force meter, other things like that. You can also change, for example, you can go into the sub menus by pressing on the button and go back. So very convenient, very easy to navigate through these different menus. Similar on the left-hand side of the screen, you also have, for example, more controls for your driver assistance systems, and here as well you can activate these things by going into the sub menus and then going back. There's also a head-up display, which is unique to the Cayenne, which gives you some very useful information so you don't have to take your eyes off the road. Let's get in the back of the Cayenne. Again, much easier to get into the back seat as compared to that of the Macan. Door opens even wider. There's plenty more room. Right away you can see this seat is again set to my driving position, 5'8", 1.7 meters if you remember. Plenty of legroom, plenty of headroom as well, and definitely very comfortable. You have air conditioning vents here in the B pillar, as well as air conditioning vents here in the center console with 2 additional climate zones. So basically there are 4 climate zones throughout this car, with seat heating on 4 seats as well. You also see the ISOFIX points are very easy to identify, still have pop-out covers, but on the whole, not too bad. Center armrest for the center seat, which, let's take a quick look. Yes, definitely much more comfortable, much more spacious than the Macan. A little bit more versatile as well. For example, I can recline the backrest, and also I can slide my bench forward and back. So plenty of more adjustability and flexibility as compared to the Macan. Let's talk about the Cayenne. We just got off the highway, so let me just quickly catch you up on how the Cayenne feels on the highway. Again, here in the GTS version, but in general, since the platform is the same, it'll be the same for most of the different models. Air suspension in normal mode really just wafts through the undulations on the road. We're in Italy, just an hour outside of Rome, so the road surface can be a little bit bumpy at times, and this air suspension definitely absorbs that. It also helps keep the SUV planted and stable. The seats really feel like you're sitting in a big couch. They're very luxurious and soft. There's very good sound insulation. The steering wheel weight is also really nice at high speed. And then you have all the assistance systems. You know, the lane keeping assist, it works pretty well. It does have a little bit of that ping pong effect, but the traffic sign recognition and the adaptive cruise control systems really do work quite well. But this is a GTS, and in general, it's a Porsche. So let's see how it is to drive on some twisty roads here in the countryside. And for that, let me start by putting it into Sport Plus mode, and then let me put the exhaust on loud. Let's see where we go. There it is. So, put my foot down. Instantly. There's so much torque from this 4-liter bi-turbo V8 engine. It also sounds really nice, you know, even though it's a bi-turbo, you do hear that for a V8 grumble. It's not as loud as perhaps I would have liked it to be, because it is just the exhaust noise that you're hearing. That's the primary sound. The steering wheel also has a really nice weight. The feedback with Porsches in general is really impeccable. Now this platform is a very familiar platform and is a very capable platform. As you guys know, this platform is used in a lot of other cars, including siblings in the VW Group family. But within the Cayenne family itself, Thomas and I recently drove the Turbo GT, which is the Cayenne Coupe, and that was just bonkers. It was mad. And so we know what this platform is capable of. Throttle response is again very sharp, even though this is that Tiptronic-esque gearbox. Shifts are also lightning quick with the paddle shifters. Visibility is also really good thanks to this tall windshield, and you are sitting actually in a very SUV kind of a stance here in the Cayenne. I am sitting quite high, and therefore it gives me that really nice visibility out front. The brakes are also pretty strong. These are the standard steel brakes. They behave and operate and perform quite good actually. Of course, in the Sport Plus mode, the suspension does get a bit jiggly, but that's to be expected. It helps you feel the surface of the road better, helps you understand the traction that is on offer better. So yeah, at least you have that ability to switch between the different modes. I do wish the sound was a little bit more amplified. Here we're coming out of this little village. Let me put my foot down. Oh yeah, it is very intoxicating. It is very addictive. And it is definitely larger than the Macan. However, it doesn't feel bulky or big. It hides that extra 200 kilos that this has over the Macan. In general, there's about a 200 kilo difference between the two. It does hide that and mask it quite well with, again, the rear axle steering and this active air suspension. It's also very agile. If you move back and forth, that rotational effect, you feel a little bit more, that rotational moment because of the rear axle steering. You feel that. At slower speeds, it rotates in the opposite direction to tighten the turning circle. At higher speeds, it turns in the same direction by a few degrees to lengthen the wheelbase so that you get more stability. It's almost like a quasi-strafing. Let's pass this cyclist very safely. There we go. Bye-bye! So, quick overtakes, not a problem at all. And you have quick access to different controls thanks to this nice steering wheel. Really nice views to give you all of that performance related information. So, definitely the Cayenne is a versatile SUV, spacious, really capable in terms of performance as well, pretty engaging. Now, the Macan GTS. So again, same highway and on the same road, so let's quickly catch up on how it was on the highway. In general, the Macan seemed a little bit quieter in some ways than the Cayenne. I guess it's down to the size of the tires or the width of the tires. These have slightly narrower section tires, and therefore I think there's a little bit less tire noise. So there's noticeably less tire noise in the cabin, but at the same time there's a little bit of kind of a humming coming from the trunk, where, you know, that's also quite a lot of, it's quite common where a space where a lot of sound is generated. But again, like the Cayenne, because of the air suspension, the Macan also handles these undulations in the road, these rugged ruts and potholes with a lot of confidence, and it doesn't really filter into the cabin and into your butt through the seat. The seats, like the Cayenne, have plenty of adjustment for side bolstering, not just for the back, but also for the base, as well as lumbar support and all kinds of adjustments. So getting comfortable in a seating position is very easy. Speaking of the seating position, this is significantly different than the Cayenne. Let's get into sport mode as I'm talking about this. Let's get into Sport Plus mode. There we go. The seating position is so much lower. You know, in the Cayenne, you definitely feel like you're sitting in an SUV. You have that tall view and you have that great visibility, but it does feel like you're sitting on top of something. Whereas here in the Macan, you definitely feel like you're sitting in something. So the Macan wraps itself around you. The dashboard is a little bit higher, the steering wheel feels a little bit taller, and it just comes together around you in a much more tighter way. It's much more intimate in here Doesn't mean that it's not spacious. No, it's definitely smaller, but it's just much more tight. You can hear the 6-cylinder V6 engine much more prominently here in the Macan than you could in the Cayenne. That torque vectoring all-wheel drive system. I have the torque split view now. Oh, there's so much traction. There's traction for days. These ceramic composite brakes are also significantly stronger than the Cayenne, so very noticeable differences between the two SUVs. The steering is also, well, sure, the Cayenne that we drove has more of the luxury pack with the leather in it, but this being the Alcantara, which I prefer, definitely feels more sporty. Oh, that acceleration is actually even a little bit more brutal than that in the Cayenne. And you can hear those little farts and bangs and pops. And even in the sport mode with the air suspension, these bad roads, at speed, it's not jarring. So the ride is still very flat. It's of course stiffer, but it doesn't mean it's sharper. Visibility is also pretty good. Even though you're sitting lower down, you have pretty good glass area. You have a good view out the back through the rear view mirror. Plenty of torque too. This is lighter, smaller. And that PDK, that PDK shifts lightning fast. This is definitely more exciting. I think it goes to show that smaller, lighter vehicles inherently are a little bit more sporty. Of course, the Cayenne is on its own remarkable. That platform is fantastic. It breaks the laws of physics. But why do you want to break the laws of physics? Play along with them. Go lighter, go smaller. That doesn't necessarily mean this is a light vehicle, but it shows the difference is very observable. Okay, we're getting into a town. Let's go back down to now normal mode. So you can turn the shouty exhaust off. The air suspension slacks off a little bit. The PDK calms down as well. And in general, the experience is now, again, very relaxing. These guys have different ideas. But I really like how both of these SUVs are so versatile. There is the truth in having your cake and eating it too, just because, fine, it's not a 911. It's not the GT4 RS that I drove just weeks ago, but it's still a Porsche, and that DNA resides in this. You can still feel it. But you get 4 doors, well, 5 if you count the hatch. You get plenty of space. You get practicality. You get 4-wheel drive. You get air suspension, which can raise itself. There's an off-road mode, for crying out loud. So, and it's compact enough compared to the Cayenne. This is definitely, an SUV that I would feel comfortable driving around in the narrow streets of Germany or Italy. We're near Rome. So definitely a car I would feel more comfortable taking into a park garage in Rome than I would in the Cayenne. So yeah, very interesting to compare these two SUVs back to back, especially the GTS versions. The GTS versions to me are the most evocative versions of these two SUVs. Of course, the Turbo GT and the Cayenne is the most bonkers, but I think the GTS is still the most evocative, the most there should be the most pure driving experience versions of the two SUVs. So, coming back to the question, which one is the right one for you? The Macan GTS starts at around 88,000 euros and the Cayenne GTS around 115,000 euros. Even in the US or the UK, the price difference between these two GTS models is still about 25,000. So that begs the question, Cayenne or Macan? But then let's talk about just GTS for a moment. Between the Macan GTS and the Cayenne GTS, the Macan definitely is better at being a GTS, if you know what I mean. It's got the agility, the better acceleration, and those slightly more compact dimensions help it wrap around you, and it's definitely the more sporty of the two. But that isn't to say the Cayenne GTS is any slouch. It's just that it's a lot more money for not more performance. So save that money if you want the practicality of the extra space, you want the more luxurious interior, you want the more sophistication. But for me, it's gotta be this.